vanishing folklore and belief.
Aesop's Fables, public domain reading, with annotated notes. The Eagle and the Fox. Aesop's Fables, circa 1814. An eagle that had young ones, looking out for something to feed them with, happened to spy a fox's cub that lay basking itself abroad in the sun. She made a stoop and trussed it immediately, but before she had carried it quite off, the old fox, coming home, implored her with tears in her eyes to spare her cub and pity the distress of a poor fond mother, who should think of no affliction so great as that of losing her child. The eagle, whose nest was up in a very high tree, thought herself secure enough from all projects of revenge, and so bore away the cub to her young ones, without showing any regard to the supplications of the fox. But that subtle creature, highly incensed at this outrageous barbarity, ran to an altar where some country people had been sacrificing a goat in the open fields, and catching up a firebrand in her mouth, made towards the tree where the eagle's nest was, and with a resolution of revenge. She had scarce ascended the first branches, when the eagle, terrified with the approaching ruin of herself and family, begged of the fox to desist, and with much submission returned her the cub again, safe and sound. Application. This fable is a warning to us not to deal hardly or injuriously by anybody. The consideration of our being in a high condition of life, and those we hurt far below us, will plead little or no excuse for us in this case. For there is scarce a creature of so despicable a rank but is capable of avenging itself some way and at some time or another. When great men happen to be wicked, how little scruple do they make of oppressing their poor neighbors. They are perched upon a lofty situation. They are perched upon a lofty station, and have built their nests on high, and having outgrown all feelings of humanity, are insensible of any pangs of remorse. The poor widow's tears, the orphaned child's cries, and the curses of the poor and miserable, like javelins thrown by the hand of a feeble old man, fall by the way and never reach their heart. But let such a one, in the midst of his flagrant injustice, remember how easy a matter it is, notwithstanding his superior distance, for the meanest vassal to be revenged of him. The bitterness of an affliction, even where cunning is wanting, may animate the poorest spirit with resolutions of vengeance. And when once that fury is thoroughly awakened, we know not what she will require before that fury is lulled to rest again. The most powerful tyrants cannot prevent a resolved assassination. There are 1,000 different ways for any private man to do the business who is heartily disposed to it, and willing to satisfy his appetite for revenge, even at the expense of his life. An old woman may clap a firebrand in the palace of a prince, and it is in the power of a poor weak fool to destroy even the mighty. The wolf in sheep's clothing. A wolf, clothing himself in the skin of a sheep, and getting in among the flock by this means, took the opportunity to devour many of these sheep, At last the shepherd discovered it, and cunningly fastening a rope about its neck, tied him up to the tree which stood hard by. Some other shepherds happening to pass that way, and observing what he was about, drew near and expressed their amazement at it. "What?" says one of them. "Bother do you to hang? Bother do you make hanging of a sheep?" "No," replies the other, "but I make the hanging of a wolf whenever I catch him, though in the habit and garb of a sheep." Then he showed them their mistake, and they applauded the justice of the execution of the wolf. Application. This fable shows us that no regard is to be had to the mere habit or outside of any person, but to undisguised worth and intrinsic virtue. Where we place our esteem upon the external garb before we inform ourselves of the qualities which it covers, we may often mistake evil for good, and instead of a sheep, take the wolf into our protection. Therefore, however innocent or sanctified anyone may appear as to the vesture wherewith he is clothed, we may act rashly, because we may be imposed upon, if from thence we take it for granted that he is inwardly as good and righteous as his outward robe would persuade us he is. Men of judgment and penetration do not use to give an implicit credit to a particular habit or a peculiar color, but love to make a more exact scrutiny, for he that will not come up to the character of an honest good kind of man, when stripped of his sheep's clothing, is but the most detestable, for his intended imposture, as the wolf, was but the most obnoxious, but the more obnoxious to the shepherd's resentment, by wearing a habit so little suiting with his manners. The Fowler and the Ringdove. A fowler took his gun and went into the woods a-shooting. He spied a ringdove above the branches of an oak, and intended to shoot it. He clapped the piece to his shoulder and took his aim accordingly, but just as he was going to pull the trigger, a snake, an adder, which he had trod upon the grass, bit him so painfully in the leg that he was forced to quit his design, and threw his gun down in a passion. The poison immediately infected his blood, and his whole body began to mortify, which, when he perceived, he could not help owning it to be just. "Fate," says he, "has brought destruction upon me, while I was contriving the destruction upon another." Application. This is another lesson against injustice, a topic in which our just author abounds, and if we consider the matter fairly, we must allow it to be as reasonable that someone should do violence to us as we should commit it upon another. When we are impartial in our reflections, thus we must always think, the unjust man, with a hardened, unfeeling heart, can do 1,000 bitter things to others. But if a single calamity touches himself, oh, how tender he is! How insupportable is the uneasiness it occasions! Why should we think others born to hard treatment more than ourselves, or imagine it can be reasonable to do to another what we ourselves should be unwilling to suffer? In our behavior to all mankind, we need only ask ourselves these plain questions, and our consciousness will tell us how to act. Conscience, like a good valuable domestic, plays the remembrancer to us upon all occasions, and gives us a gentle twitch when we are going to do a wrong thing. It does not, like the adder in the fable, bite us to death, but only gives us kind cautions. However, if we neglect these just and frequent warnings, and continue in a course of wickedness and injustice, do not let us be surprised if Providence thinks fit at last to give us a home sting, and to exercise a little retaliation upon us.
Vanishing folklore